Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And welcome back. We're back in the studio with attorney Jeff Roberts. Jeff does a lot of personal injury work, primarily car wrecks, motorcycle wrecks, truck wrecks in Calloway County, where his primary office is, but he also has a Christian County office over in Hopkinsville. Jeff, welcome back to the episode. Glad to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
Today let's talk about different parts of a claim, and there's a new aspect of injury claims that I really hadn't thought about, but you've actually kind of brought me up to speed on this. It's kind of interesting, called emotional distress. Before we get there, though, let's talk about something that I guess people are a little bit more familiar with, at least the term, something called pain and suffering. Kind of what is that in an injury claim? How does that come about?
Pain and suffering, whenever you're injured in a motor vehicle collision or in any type of claim that would result in a civil case, a negligence case, then there's a variety of different damages that you can recover, past lost wages, future lost wages, past medical, future medical, which people understand that's kind of, all right, I missed 10 weeks of work, I made $500 a week, this is what my damages are for that. And those are a little more concrete, so to speak.
Or here's my medical bills for this surgery,
exactly.
or for this ER visit. And
exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
Those are a little more concrete, and people tend to understand, and jurors tend to understand those type of damages much more so than pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is getting into how the injury affects you in ways that aren't as easily quantifiable in dollar figures. Now, that's not to say that we don't quantify pain and suffering in this country in dollar figures. That's what, 90%, I won't do that, but the vast majority of medical treatment is people going to a doctor because they don't feel well. They have pain or, they got cold and flu and they feel miserable because of that, but it's some sort of a pain or suffering type situation that they have going on that they want gone. And so we put dollar figures on it all the time. Most, like I said, a lot of the medical treatment that we receive is to try to get us out of pain or take away something that is interfering with our enjoyment of life. And that's kind of the way, even though a lot of times we don't refer to it as loss of enjoyment of life, to some extent, I think that's what it is that we are talking about here. Pain, people understand what pain is. If you're involved in a car wreck and, your knee slams in, it pushes the dash and back into your knee and it breaks your kneecap and knocks your knee joint out of alignment and you have to have surgery for that. Well, that's an extremely painful type of injury, and people understand that type, the physical pain that someone goes through from that standpoint. Now, and that is something that's easily understood by most people because most everybody has suffered pain at some point in their lifetime, physical pain at some point in their lifetime. The suffering aspect can be a little more different in identifying or defining for people. From there, I kind of like to liken it to outside of the pain aspect of it, but how that affects the person long term. That's where you get into the loss of enjoyment of life type standpoint. So, all right, you've had this injury to your knee, and now you walk with a limp, and you're a 20-year-old college student, and female college student or male college student for that matter, and now you've got a big gash and a huge scar on your leg that every time you go out in public in shorts, everybody sees that. You feel self-conscious about that. I've represented a lot of younger people who've had those type of things when they've had visible scars that have that it affects them. They don't want to do that. One lady I represented who had significant injuries and had to have a lot of surgery in her pelvis region and in her abdomen region because of injuries from a car wreck. And when I was talking to her, she would not wear anything that showed her midriff anymore because she was so self-conscious of that from that. And so that can have a great effect on someone.
Well, we've talked about that when we did an episode on dog bites,
Right.
how when you have scarring, maybe it's to the face or something like that, where, a dog, mauled somebody, and then it's not just the injury itself, it's the suffering afterwards, the self-consciousness, the embarrassment, the shame, whatever.
Correct.
All of that, I guess, comes into this, doesn't it?
Yes, it should anyway. If you've got an attorney doing what they should be doing, yes, all of that comes into that. And frankly, a lot of times that's the that is what affects the person the longest, because some of these injuries are lifelong. A lot of times the injuries are lifelong for the person, and the surgery, the initial injury, surgery, and recuperation is may only be 3 months or so, but then these other aspects can last long time. Having to use a cane or a crutch to walk because of that type of injury, or if it's a shoulder injury, not being able to lift over 10 or 15 pounds or whatever it may be, that affects the person the rest of their life. Could affect their ability to work, but also do things around the house. If they normally did maintenance and stuff around their own maintenance and stuff around the house, but now they can't get down on their knees to change out a outlet or something of that nature, that all comes into it. And right or wrong, I don't think it's everybody can disagree in this regard, I guess, but my generation and several generations before me, and maybe even after me, a lot of our self-worth is based on what we provide, taking care of our family, taking care of our household, taking care of our things. And when you're not able to do that, I've talked to a lot of people in my office who, because of an injury, weren't able to do that anymore, and it has a profound impact on people. And you can say, well, you shouldn't put that. That's not where you should put your self-worth. And if I were to talk to my wife and say, you know what, well, if I wasn't able to practice law anymore and earn an income and provide for us, would you think less of me? And she's going to say, absolutely not. That's not why I love you. But that's still going to have a profound impact on me, because the way I was raised growing up is, you take care of your family, you take care of all of these things, and so it would affect me from that standpoint drastically. And I've had clients where it's affected them drastically from that standpoint, and that comes into the suffering aspect of it. It's not physically painful that I can't do that, but it's mentally mental anguish, mental suffering from that standpoint, and that's something that the attorney should be addressing with every one of their clients that they're representing in these types of matters, so that they truly understand the full impact of the injuries on their client.
Well, so that's pain and suffering, and again, it's that internal injury. Is that thing that you can't really tell when somebody's sitting in a chair. You can tell if they're on crutches or whatever. Yeah, that must be painful, but it's that internal suffering that they're dealing with because of a limitation now that was probably not their fault, and so now they're going to have to cope with that or deal with that throughout their life. Let me transition into again what I was really not even aware of, but it's another type of claim called emotional distress, and it's related, but it's not the same thing. How do you describe emotional distress in terms of an injury?
Well, emotional distress, to me, I classify it differently from a physical injury and differently from pain and suffering. Other attorneys or others may not describe it as the way I do. This is the way I look at it, envision it in my own mind. is from when I'm thinking of emotional distress, I'm thinking more of not what happens to me, but what I witness, what I see. So if I'm in a vehicle and somebody, if I'm driving, my wife is in the passenger seat, somebody runs a stop sign and T-bones us on the passenger side, and I'm not injured, but I look over and my wife is severely injured, and from that, then that's emotional distress to me. From I didn't have any physical injuries, pain and suffering from that standpoint, but the emotional distress is seeing what happened to my wife uh, in that type of situation, or your child, or something of that nature. That's where I distinguish it. How I distinguish it myself from pain and suffering. Now you know, in that same setting, my wife could have, if she recovers, she's going to have obviously the physical injury. She recovers. She's got some mental suffering going on from because it's affected what she can do and things of that nature. But she may have PTSD as well from it. That's still part of the to me, part of the pain and suffering part of aspect of that, part of the injury that she received. The emotional distress would be mine seeing that. Now, I could have a physical injury as well, but then have the emotional distress because of what I've witnessed happen to her from that standpoint. That's the way I distinguish them in my own mind. Other attorneys may look at it differently. That's the way I distinguish it, the difference between emotional distress and pain and suffering.
That's an interesting take on it, because you kind of all roll it up into one thing, but it's really two distinct aspects, or it can be two distinct aspects of an injury claim. And again, you may not have the injuries yourself, but you witnessed this, and you
suffer,
yeah.
and you have mental suffering because you witnessed it. Yes, it can be very, very. I mean, that's a very traumatic experience on someone, even though they don't have a physical injury. That seeing a loved one have a significant injury or die can be very, very will be very traumatic. I can't imagine it not being very traumatic and causing emotional distress to the person who witnessed it. Whether even if you don't know the person, you're going to have emotional distress from seeing something like that happen to somebody else. But if it's a loved one, even greater emotional distress as a result of it.
It's amazing. You go any Friday night, you go to a football game, or you go to a wrestling match on Saturday. You watch the moms in the stand. Trust me, they're having a little emotional distress up there when things happen on the field or on the mat. So now amplify that into an actual accident. You can kind of get your head around. Wow, this is real. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you go about? This is just a very broad question, because every situation is different. But how do you begin to place a value on what emotional distress is in terms of the overall claim? I mean, with an injury, I can say here's the medical bills, here's the rehab bills for the therapy and stuff like that. But how do you start to get at?
Well, the way to place a value on pain, on suffering, and on emotional distress, there's a variety of different ways that you can do that. In each case would be different in how you would want to do that, in my opinion anyway. And, I've part of what I, from attorneys are supposed to, or not are supposed to, in Kentucky, we're required to receive continuing legal education. And, doing what I do, one of the things I do from a continuing legal education is I attend continuing legal education to help to learn new avenues to do these things. I'm look for new books that others may have put out, new things of that nature. But I also think about it and try to come up with my own ideas as well on how to present that, especially practicing in Western Kentucky. As you mentioned before, I've got an office here in Murray, Kentucky. I've got an office in Hopkinsville. I handle these cases all over the state of Kentucky, but those where my offices are located. But how you would present a case and make the arguments in Calloway County, Kentucky, where Murray's at, versus how you're going to make that same argument in Jefferson County, where Louisville is different, because you have such a different jury pool from that. So each case is going to be different in how you do that. There's various ways that I do that and argue that to a jury from that standpoint. Frankly, I don't want to go into detail about that because I don't want to give my tricks away to a defense attorney who
No
may listen to
no
this.
secret sauce today. There we
No,
go.
that's it. I'm not giving my recipes away.
You and the Colonel.
No soup for you.
You and the Colonel.
No, I'm the soup Nazi.
Yeah.
But there are different ways that you can do that, and some can be in one jury pool. One way would be the best way to do it based on that jury pool, and in a different jury pool, a different way to do that. Usually, when I'm getting ready to try a case, I have before the jury selection when I'm preparing. I will have a couple of different ways that I anticipate potentially arguing that to the jury, and then once I find out which jurors I'm having will help me to formulate that even better for the trial itself.
That makes sense because it may not be a factor in every one of your claims, but in the vast, I would say on an average claim, there's a possibility. So you've got to be prepared to.
You've got to be
that.
prepared. And frankly, most cases don't go to a jury trial. Most cases resolve at some point during that process. But you always proceed as though the case is going to go to trial, or at least that's the way I do it. I always proceed as though the case is going to go to trial. So I lay the foundation when I'm taking doctors' depositions for, when I file the suit or before I file the suit, I start thinking about those things. When I know I'm going to have to file the suit, okay, how am I going to present this? What am I going to do? And then lay out that foundation to present it so that I've got the evidence, because you can't wait to the last minute to do some of the arguments that are work here in Calloway County anyway. You've got to have that doctor's deposition. And a doctor's deposition may occur 6 months before the trial. So you've got to know, okay, I may go this way to argue pain and suffering to this jury. So you ask the doctor the appropriate questions during their deposition 6 months ahead of time. And then so you can make the arguments that you need to make when the time comes.
That makes sense. And that's one of the advantages of having somebody who's litigated for 32 years now, over 32 years now. You've been down this road before, so you're going to prepare maybe a little differently based on your experience and your knowledge of, hey, this is what's probably going to happen, or most likely it could happen.
Correct.
Do you mind if we talk just a few minutes about PTSD and how that factors into all of this? So you've got your pain and suffering. We've talked about emotional distress. PTSD is a term that we've all, since I guess the Gulf War, we've all really kind of gotten familiar with that term. How does that come into play in an accident case?
PTSD can come into play in an accident case. I see it frequently when children are involved. When they're in a vehicle during an accident, it's not uncommon, in fact, probably much more common than not, that a child involved in an accident will suffer some PTSD afterwards, be afraid to ride in a car, or be afraid to ride in a car. If the mother was driving during the accident, be afraid to ride with the mother in the car. If the dad was driving, be afraid to drive with the dad in the car, or being the driver of the car. I see that quite often, actually, from that standpoint. But even adults, you see that where they have that the PTSD from that aspect of being afraid to do that or having nightmares from the about the collision, and so it's not uncommon that people suffer PTSD after they've been involved in a significant collision. And the attorney's job is to in my opinion, is to talk with their clients about all aspects of how this collision has affected them, and to explore that. And if the person, because frankly, a lot of times people, especially in Western Kentucky, don't seek mental health treatment for after an accident, because they just, I don't know if it's, I think it's several factors, one of which is they don't realize, they think it's just normal to have this. They don't think about PTSD being the cause of it, or them having PTSD, number one. Number two, there's a stigma, and there shouldn't be, but there's still a stigma in our society about mental health. And number three, mental health care is not as available as physical health care is in Western Kentucky. I don't think anywhere in Kentucky, but for that matter. But so a lot of times I will talk to someone and we will and I'll ask them about it. You know, are you having crying spells? Are you having nightmares, etc. And then say, well, you might want to look at going to a psychologist, mental health counselor, or something of that nature. Talk to your family doctor about that to see if there's something that can be done because it affects your quality of life. There is, and you know, we talk about PTSD. You hear that term a lot. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You've actually had to have, as I understand it, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not giving any mental health advice whatsoever here. But you have to have, as I understand it, acute stress disorder before, and if that goes for the certain length of time, I can't remember if it's off the top of my head if it's 3 months or 6 months, then it's considered post-traumatic stress disorder. And so, you know, sometimes it's just an acute stress disorder, traumatic stress disorder that the person is having, and then with treatment, it never develops into post-traumatic stress disorder. They get the treatment and they recover, and that's frankly what I want for my clients. I don't want them to have the post-traumatic stress. I want it to be resolved as quickly as possible for them, both physical injuries and mental health injuries. I want them to get the best treatment they can get as well as they can get, because I want my clients' future quality of life to be the best it can possibly be for them.
No, that makes sense. So, I mean, is it, you know, we've talked in previous episodes about, you know, sometimes you're going to call in an expert, and a medical expert or a mental health expert, such as a psychologist or a psychiatrist or some other type of therapist, could often be involved. For PTSD, do you need to get that actually diagnosed by a mental health professional?
Yes.
Okay. So that really... I
mean, the family doctor probably could diagnose it and testify to it in court.
But it's probably more credible, I guess, if you have a therapist who understands this.
Yeah, I would always want a mental health professional, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, to diagnose it and also to be the expert witness, because in my opinion, they are going to be in a much better position to explain to a jury how that affects the person than a family doctor is going to. I'm not downgrading family doctors at all from that standpoint, but
it's just not their specialty.
It's not what they treat day in, day out. They are very, very knowledgeable and very capable of diagnosis. But most family doctors, if a person has PTSD, they're going to refer them to another specialist for the treatment, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, mental health counselor, whatever the case may be. Most of the time, they're going to refer them out to someone else. And that person is seeing people day in, day out. They're the ones keeping up to date with the most current in literature on that area, and most familiar with the DSMs on that, so that they're going to be able to explain it better to a jury than, in my opinion, than a family doctor is going to be able to explain it, because they can explain it based on having treated patients with that day in, day out for many, many years.
And again, that just supports the overall argument, or the theory of the claim, is that, hey, look, I have a specialist here who does this and who is saying my client is suffering from this condition because of the negligence of the other party, and that's kind of what you're trying to get to overall.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jeff, we started off talking a little bit about the things that you don't usually. They're a little bit more abstract. It's the pain and suffering versus the medical bill. The medical bill I could put on the counter and say, this was caused by the wreck, and that's pretty easy to understand. Pain and suffering is a little bit different. And then we went into yet another aspect, which is the emotional distress, which sometimes is, I'm in a situation and I witnessed this happening to my loved one. So that's kind of how you differentiate it. And then we've talked a little bit about PTSD. I think, again, given your career, given the past 32 years that you've done this, I think maybe you're pretty in tune at asking the right kind of questions and knowing, hey, wait a minute, this is another aspect of this claim that we don't want to overlook, and you know how to kind of broach that topic with the client, and I think someone who's not building a case to go to trial might overlook that, and that's I love the way that we've talked in previous episodes that when you take a case, you assume this could go all the way to trial, and so you're going to go through that very carefully, very methodically, and build that case so that if it ever does have to go in front of a jury, you've got the facts, you've got the case built out. And again, that's just, when I look at, wow, if I'm in an accident and I've got to call somebody, I've got Jeff Roberts right here in Calloway County and over in Christian County with 32 years of litigation experience. And I think that makes me feel good about the fact that if I've got to make that phone call, that's a great option to have on your side there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, after doing this for 32 years, I'm much more knowledgeable now on these areas than I was 32 years ago when I started practicing. In 92, if I was talking to a client, there's things I would not have thought to ask from there. Now, I had a excellent mentor that taught me about that, and I'd sit in and watch him, and he had all the years. So I learned it early on from talking with him, but I'm much more knowledgeable even now than I was then. And of course, obviously, medical science has changed greatly over that period of time as well from there. So yes, you're correct that's having an attorney that is familiar with that area and knows what to look for is very valuable and can make a difference in the ultimate recovery that's obtained in the case, knows the right experts to get and what to look for from that standpoint. And, as far as working a case up, yes, you're correct. When I take a case on, I'm assuming I'm going to be taking that case all the way through a jury trial at the start. And frankly, over 32 years of doing this, my experience is that the best way to get a case settled is to be willing to try the case.
Right, because the other side's going to know that. You've got a track record. You typically are willing to do that. You're not looking for the fast settlement.
The insurance company and the defense attorney will know the attorneys who are working the case up for trial versus even if you haven't tried a lot of cases, they can tell you're working this case up to try the case.
Right. The way you're
and know
approaching
you're willing to try this case versus the ones who are working it up to settle. And at least in my opinion, and others may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine, but the ones who are working the case up to settle are never going to get the same value as someone working it up for trial because the defense attorney and the insurance company knows they're eventually going to settle because they don't want to try the case. And so the best way to get a case settled for fair value is to be willing and ready to try the case.
Well, I love the fact that we're talking about actually trying the case because, you talked about, an experienced attorney knows how to get the right information from the expert, the medical professional or whomever. It knows how to get the right questions asked so that you get the right information back from your client. But as an experienced litigator, you also know how to explain that in a way that the jury understands it. It's like having somebody stand up in front and give the scientific explanation, or someone who stands up and gives the real world explanation that I can actually understand. And again, I just think that comes back to your experience of 32 years.
I agree from that standpoint. Yes, I think that the more experience you have doing it, the better you can get at doing that. The reason I hesitated, there was and I can't recall exactly the way it was, but there was a great orator and another guy who were supposed to get up and did get up in front of an audience and I'm thinking it was reading maybe the 23rd Psalm or Amazing Grace or something. I can't remember what they were reading. And the orator got up and did an excellent job on it. The other person got up, and when they got done, people were crying, and they asked about it and said, well, this guy knew exactly how to speak and all of this. This guy, the other guy, though, you could tell from listening to him that he knew the Creator. And I'm not getting into a religious thing, but that's a difference. It's someone who understands, someone who knows words versus someone who understands what's going on can make a big difference. And the person who understands what's going on can convey that much better than somebody who just is good at speaking words.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Jeff, if somebody's listening to this and they need to reach out and to talk to you as an attorney, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you? And again, we've talked about you've got a Murray office and you've got a Christian County office in Hopkinsville. The nice thing is you've got one phone number.
Correct. I have one number, the phone number to reach me, and that's the best way to reach me is by phone, is 270-753-0053. If you want to use an 800 number, it's 1-800-844-5108. Both ring to the exact same phones. As I've said before, if you call during business hours, you're most likely going to have a live person answer the phone. From that, I want a live person answering the phone. Unless everybody's tied up on another line, you will get someone to answer the phone call when you call into the office from that standpoint. And regardless of which office I'm at, if you call in, they can get in touch with me and we can talk at that point. Or if I'm not at where I can talk to you, we can set up a time to talk.
Awesome. Fantastic. Jeff, buddy, I really appreciate the time you took to talk to us about this issue. Again, it's just another aspect of dealing with a personal injury claim that a lot of people may not have fully understood, and evidently, these are important factors. So thanks for taking the time to explain that, and we'll talk to you again here in about 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.